Welcome. It's Aaron again, bringing you another random rambling video. I started this on Sunday, the 31st and last day of August in 2025 at exactly 10 o'clock in the AM. Along with welcoming you to my channel, allow me to thank you for watching. Please comment, like, and subscribe before sharing this video and turning on the post notification bell. This will be the final episode of the Lori versus Kim saga. If you've not been watching, I will recap what it is, and then I'll tell the final story or the final episode. I'll recap the fact that my live-in girlfriend Lori developed a strong dislike, if not a hatred, for my best friend through high school, a girl named Kim. Excuse me, I burped. Now, after I admitted to Lori that I was in love with Kim, she forbade me from ever seeing or talking to her. Now, on the surface, you might think, well, of course not. You just admitted to loving and being in love with another girl while you were living with this girl. Well, that's all and good, and I understand why you might say that, but the thing is, she admitted to me that she was in love with another guy with whom she had a sexual relationship. All Kim and I did, and if you watch the videos back that I've already made, you'll learn that all Kim and I ever did was kiss. At a turnabout dance, we did kiss one time at a turnabout dance, and it didn't feel right, so we never did that again. We never had any type of romantic relationship. We never did anything sexual at all. So I did confess that I was in love with her to Lori, but Lori confessed to me that she was in love with this guy Ray, a guy after whom she named her son, Raymond. This guy Raymond and her used to have sex. They had a sexual relationship for quite some time from what I understood. And he happened the day or maybe 2 days after she forbade me from ever seeing or talking to Kim again. He came in town on a visit from the Navy. And he stopped by our house to see Lori. And that's fair enough, of course. You know, they were good friends. They were, well, fuck buddies is all they were, really. But, she had feelings for him. Maybe he developed feelings for her as well. But he stopped by, and I explained how I was sitting on the chair watching TV, and there was a knock at the door, and I got up, of course, to answer it. I rarely let people knock on the door and then just ignore them. But in this case, I did get up and answer the door, and it was a young gentleman, not wearing a Navy uniform or anything, but he was a handsome young fella, and he asked if Lori was home. So I called for her. She was home. In fact, she was in the bedroom while I was in the living room watching television. So I called for her. She came out. She ran, and she looked at the door, and she said, "Hey!" And she ran to the door and jumped into the arms of this gentleman and squeezed him tight, and he spun her around and squeezed her tight, and they declared they missed each other, and he said, "I missed you," and she said, "I missed you," and I instantly assumed that this was the Ray guy she told me about, and turns out I was right. That was Ray, the guy with whom she was in love, and the guy with whom she had a sexual relationship. And this was a day, like I said, this was a day or two after she forbade me from ever seeing or talking to Kim again. And she was in love with this guy. So she asked me, he asked her, asked. I can't say asked. He asked her if she wanted to go out to lunch with him. Lori asked me if I cared. I told her I don't care. And so they went out to lunch. Supposedly they went out to lunch because it took them 6 hours or whatever it was to go out to eat and for her to get back. 6 hours after they went out, of course. I found out later, after we broke up, that she had sex with him that day. I found that out later, of course. And so I kept my word and did not contact Kim. A couple times I tried to, because I just missed her. I missed her dreadfully. And Lori stopped me, and so I apologized. And then from then, well, one night, I'll try to hurry up because I'm going to run out of time again in this one. One night, I was chilling with Lori, And I was chilling with Lori, and there came another knock at the door. Actually, this time we saw headlights. It was night. It was at night. We saw headlights, and we saw. And turns out there was a truck pulling into our driveway. It was our buddy Greg's truck. We saw the headlights, and I said, "Who's that?" And she looked out the window, and she said, "It's Greg." And I said, "Okay." I said, "I wonder what he's doing here." So shortly after that, there was a knock on the door, and Lori yelled for him to come in. She said, "Come in." So Greg came in, and she's like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "What's up, buddy? What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well," and he told her, he said, "I'm stealing your boyfriend for the night." And she said, "No, you're not. We're about to watch a movie." And he told me, "Come on there, and we're going out." I said, "Nah." I said, "No, I promise you we'll watch a movie." He's like, "Trust me, you'll want to come." And I said, "Well, I don't know." I said, "Lori, do you mind if I go out with Greg tonight?" And she said, "Well, yes, I do." I said, "Well, why?" I said, "Well, where are we going, Greg?" He's like, "Well, I can't tell you. It's a surprise." And Lori's like, "I know you guys are going to a strip club." And and I said, "Lori, I'm not going to any strip. I won't go to a strip club. If he's taking me to a strip club, I'll stay out in the truck because I ain't going to no strip club." She just knew we were going to a strip club. So so I told her I was going out with Greg that night. I finally got a backbone in the relationship by this point. Instead of telling her, "No, you're not going out to lunch with a guy you used to fuck." And instead of telling her that day, I should have, but I told her, "Yeah, you can go out to lunch with him." I felt bad for her. She missed him. I know she was in love with him and really cared about the guy. So I let her go out to lunch that day. And then by this time, I grew a backbone and told Lori, I wanted to go out with Greg. I said, "No, I'm going out with Greg tonight." Because Greg kept telling me, "Dude, you're going to want to come. You need to come with me." So I put my foot down and told Lori I was going out with Greg that night. Lori made Greg promise that he wasn't taking me to any strip club. Lori was very jealous. Perhaps more jealous than I. And I'm pretty jealous. I'm a very jealous person. Very jealous person. But I think Lori was probably more jealous than I am. So she was very worried that we were going to go, for whatever reason, she had in her head we were going to a strip club. And she made Greg promise that he wasn't taking me to a strip club. And I told her, "Don't worry, I'm not going to any strip club." And she said, "Well, you won't be able to stop him." I said, "Well, I'll just stay in the truck. I'm not going inside to see any naked women other than you, Lori." And so I get in the truck. I said, "Where are we going, dude?" I said, "For real, don't take me to any strip club." He's like, "We're not going to a strip club." I said, "Well, where are we going?" He's like, "You'll see." I'm like, "Dude, I said, why can't you tell me?" He's like, "You'll see." I said, "Dude, I don't feel good about this. Just take me home." He's like, "No, I'm not taking you home. You'll want to come. Trust me." So I said, "Okay." I trusted him, and we went on about our way, and we went into an area of St. Louis, a suburb of St. Louis called Hazelwood. We went into Hazelwood, and I'm like, "Who do you know in Hazelwood?" Greg was born and raised in Ferguson, Missouri, I believe. You may have heard of Ferguson due to the riots in, what was that, 14 or 04? I'm like, "Well, who do you know in Hazelwood?" Turns out, he knew a lot of people. I mean, we both knew a lot of people in Hazelwood. I just didn't know where we were going. I said, "Where are we going? To a party?" And I said, "We're going to a party." He's like, "No party." I go, "Well, where are we going?" He's like, I said, "How close are we to where we're going?" He's like, "Just a few more minutes and you'll find out." So we pull into an apartment complex I had never been to. I wasn't familiar with it. And he pulls into a parking space right up front by an apartment, right by its front door. And he's like, "Come on." So he gets out, so I get out. We go to the door. He knocks on the door of the apartment that we were parked close to. And a young lady whom I never saw before in my life answers the door and says, and she's like, "Greg." And she says, "Greg, what's up?" And she gives Greg a hug. And I go, "Okay." I'm like, "Who's this?" So I asked Greg, I said, "Who's this?" And she said, "You don't know who I am, but I know who you are." And I said, "Well, how do you know who I am?" She said, "You're Aaron." I said, "Well, how do you know that?" And she said, "Because Greg promised us that he'd bring you by tonight." And promised who? And then At that point, just as Lori jumped into the arms of her buddy Ray, Kim came flying to the door. Kim, that I'm talking about, came flying to the door, and she's like, "Aaron!" And she jumped on me and gave me a big hug, and we squeezed and hugged each other, and it was a nice, what's the word when you come back together? A nice coming back together. Well, I don't know what's the word for that. I forget the word. I better get on with the story. So, long story short, Greg had become friends with Kim in the recent weeks, and she kept nagging him to bring me over there. And he kept telling her, well, Aaron's not allowed to come, Aaron's not allowed to talk to you anymore. And she's like, no, but what Lori doesn't know won't hurt her. Greg's like, well, I'm not going to lie. Lori's my friend. I'm not going to lie to her. Well, apparently he had a change of heart because reunion, that's what I was trying to think. We had a very touching reunion, Kim and I. And so, obviously, Greg had a change of heart and decided that he was willing to lie to his friend Lori. Because he did that night and took me over there. And I had a decision to make. Did I want to break Lori's trust and hang out there, or did I want to tell Greg to take me home? I decided, fuck Lori. Not really fuck Lori, but I decided, you know what, I really wanted to hang out with Kim, so I did. That's what we did. I didn't go home, I hung out with Kim. We actually took a ride. Me and Greg and Kim took a nice little drive out, down around Mo Bottom. It's an area of St. Louis where a lot of people go to drive. Missouri Bottom Road. It's a nice drive. So we went out for a ride on the Missouri Bottom Road. It was a nice little drive. Me and Kim and Greg hanging out, and we got back to Kim's apartment sometime later, and we chilled some more. But while we were there, at some point, Kim asked Greg for our number. Me and Lori and my number. Lori's and my number, I guess is how you would say it. And so she asked Greg for our number, and for whatever reason, Greg gave it to her. But during these last few weeks that he was hanging out with Kim, he had become sweet on her, which is easy to do. She was very easy on the eyes and just an amazing person. I will tell you that now that I'm on my own and I'm allowed to see her as much as I want, she doesn't want to see me anymore, which is my fault. I might get to that in a different episode of Kim and I. The Kim and I. Shall we dance? Dun, dun, dun. Etc., etc., etc. Hang out with Kim. She asked Greg at some point in the night for our number. Greg gives it to her, probably because he was sweet on her and didn't want to tell her no. And then for whatever reason, probably because she's a shit disturber, I knew that about her already, Kim calls Lori and says, guess what? Guess who this is, she tells her. Well, I could hear her side of the conversation. And so she makes a phone call, and I just happened to be sitting next to her. When she made a phone call, and I heard her say, well, hello, guess who this is? I didn't know who she was calling at that point, of course. She said, guess who this is? And I'm like, well, I wonder who she's talking to. She called them, and they don't know who she is. And she said, this is Kim. Yes, Kim so-and-so. I don't want to say her, I don't want to dox her by giving up her last name, because you could find her on Facebook and then harass her. I don't want that to happen. So that's kind of the end of the Lori versus Kim saga. That's what, so she told Lori that I was over there, and Lori said I want to talk to him. So she put me on the phone, and Lori's like, "What are you doing? Are you really hanging out with Kim?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Why?" I said, "That's where Greg took me, and I wanted to hang out with her." And she said, "You better get your ass home now, or you're gonna find your shit in the front lawn when you get here." And I said, "Well," I'll come home when I feel like it. And which is how I felt at that point. I was really having a good time with Kim. I still loved her. She was still At one point, Kim was my world. We were never together, but at one point, she was my world, man. That was my best friend, and boy, I loved me some Kim. So, I was doing my girlfriend wrong without a doubt, but I don't know, she did me wrong by forbidding me from seeing a girl I loved. I let her go out to lunch with this guy she was in love with, that she was having sex with. Me and Kim only had kissed one time in a dance. And if you go back and watch the videos I made about this, then you'll see that. I better hurry. I'm going to get done with this now. So, I told Lori, well, I said, if you want to throw my shit on the front lawn,